Hey, Gwen, I got word from John Contos that I think he will be late. A job was running along.
Got it. I'm eating.
Say, Gwen, I wanted to let you know Kendra Lissam is listed in the attendees, and I, for some reason, cannot promote her to a panelist. Can you see if it'll work on your end?
Let me try.
Great. And whenever you are ready to rock and roll, we're good on our side.
Okay. Kendra, can you speak now? I think I opened the door for you to be able to speak. Wait, promote to panelists. Let me try that. Okay. Kendra is coming back in as a panelist, it looks like.
Oh, let's see here. Excellent. Thank you, Gwen.
Great. All right, we've got a few more minutes and then we'll get started. And just, Lisa, for your information, we've got 4 items on the agenda today, and I'm going to take 3.4, which is Kendra's CDBG and home program presentation, and bump that up to number 3.
Oh, certainly. Thank you.
And we'll do the MRA resolution last.
All right, great.
Thanks. And Karen, I'm going to promote you to panelist also. There you go.
Thanks, Gwen.
Great. All right, hopefully we get one more for a quorum, but we'll see. Give it another 50 seconds or so. Great, and Lisa, did you want to post, I think you might have had it up earlier. Do you just want to post the information again with the phone number to call, that kind of stuff?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll move it to the next page. Thanks, Gwen.
Thanks. We'll go ahead and get started here then.
There we go.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to call Administration and Finance Committee of the Missoula City Council to order. It is September 8th, 2021. We are still having virtual meetings, so you can go to the city website page and go to meetings, and go to the agenda and find the link to click there to join, to give public comment or participate. You alternatively can leave us a voicemail at 406-552-6012. And finally, you can email council@ci.missoula.mt.us if you want to send us an email. Happy to get your public comment one way or the other. Lisa, could you do roll call? Not sure if we've got a quorum. I think we might have a quorum now, actually. But if you want to do roll call, and then we'll approve the minutes.
Sounds good. Stacy Anderson. Looks like she's out. Mirta Becerra. Looks like out. John Contos, I believe, is out today. Heather Harp.
Present.
Jordan Hess.
Present.
Gwen Jones.
Present.
Julie Merritt.
She's gone today.
Out. Jesse Ramos.
Present.
Amber Sherrill.
Present.
Sandra Vasica.
She's gone today.
On today. Brian Von Lossberg.
Here.
And Heidi West.
Here.
So we have 5 members absent and 7 members present.
Great, thank you. We do have a quorum. We have minutes from August 21st, 2021. Are there any changes to those minutes? Seeing none, those will stand approved. And I'm calling for public comment, but we seem to have no one attending in the attendee room. So no public comment. We've got 4 items today, and I'm going to take the last item. I'm going to bump it up and take it 3rd instead of 4th, just to let everyone know. But for right now, we've got 2 items from Lee Griffin, 3.1 and 3.2. However you want to present on those, Lee.
Thank you very much. I will present both of them at the same time, as there are 2 resolutions for essentially the same type of item. These are 2 reimbursement resolutions that I'm asking City Council to approve. And a little bit of background on what a reimbursement resolution is. These are done in order to comply with IRS regulations, so that in the event that we wish to issue tax exempt debt for items, we have ticked this box by stating that we believe we're going to have, you know, in this case, around $4.7 million or up to $4.7 million that we would bond for equipment and CIP items, and $450,000 for sidewalk and curb items. So those would be 2 separate bonds. These we would bring back to City Council for approval at the time that we wish to issue financing. But again, today we're asking for City Council to approve these 2 reimbursement resolutions so that we are in line with IRS regulations. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Are there any questions on these 2 items? If not, I am looking for a motion. And Amber.
I'd be happy to make the recommended motion for both of them.
Great, thank you. Is there any public comment on these 2 motions? You made 2 motions, correct, Amber? Great, thank you. Seeing no public comment, any other questions or comments from council? Seeing none, we will have a roll call vote. I think you should just do each motion individually.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sounds good. So this would be the first one for the reimbursement, let's see, for equipment financing. So Heather Harp.
Yes.
Jordan Hess.
Yes.
Gwen Jones.
Yes.
Jesse Ramos.
Yes.
Amber Sherrill.
Yes.
Brian Von Lossberg.
Yes.
And Heidi West.
Yes.
So that is unanimous for all in attendance.
Great, thank you.
Now the resolution for sidewalk and curb financing. Heather Hart.
Madam Chair, it's
Oh.
Stacy Anderson. Just wanted to let you know I'm actually in attendance.
Oh, thank you. Did you want to vote, Stacy, on the above reimbursement resolution? Is your vote yes?
Yes.
Yes, you're here, or
Ma'am.
yes? Okay, thank you.
Yes, yes. Thank
Yes,
you.
yes. Okay, that sounds good. Thank you. So on the second one for sidewalk and curb financing, Stacy Anderson,
Yes.
Heather Harp,
Yes.
Jordan Hess,
Yes.
Gwen Jones,
Yes,
Jesse Ramos,
Yes.
Amber Sherrill,
Yes.
Brian Von Losberg,
Yes.
and Heidi West.
Yes.
That's unanimous for all 8 council members in attendance.
thank you. And both of those can go onto the consent agenda. Thank you, Lee. See you next week. All right, the next item, we're actually going to jump to 3.4 and do that first, which is project review and outcomes for CDBG and home program year 2020. And we have both Kendra Lissam and Karen Gasvoda here to present on that. So good afternoon.
Hi.
Thanks, Gwen. So let me share my screen and then Karen will kick us off. Give it a second here. There we go.
Okay, thanks, Kendra. So we're here. One of the it's Kendra Lissam and Karen Gasvoda with the Community Development. We're grant administrators. And one of the obligations of this city, we must fulfill as an entitlement city for the Federal Community Development Block Grant and Home Investment Partnership Program is to prepare a yearly consolidated annual performance and evaluation report. And each program year runs from July 1st through June 30th. And we're here today to ask for public comment on our end of the year report and for a public hearing date for our program year 2020 CAPER. And as a reminder, these are federal funds that do not come out of the city budget. A quick review of the CDBG and home programs. Each year, the city receives federal funds from the Department of Housing and Urban Development. And Missoula has been an entitlement city since 1999 and a participating jurisdiction since 2003. These funds help benefit individuals with low and moderate income and leverage resources to improve the supply of affordable housing, public improvements, and public services. Low and moderate income residents are classified as those whose income does not exceed 80% of the area median income, which in Missoula for a family of 4 is around $75,000. Area median income is the household income for the middle household in a region. So when we say we help those with incomes that do not exceed 80% of AMI, we're saying, like, for example, that we help our households of 4 who make less than $60,000 a year. The CAPER is our chance to tell the story of what we accomplished using our federal dollars over the past year. We report our accomplishments in connection not only to our annual goals as outlined in our annual action plan, but also in relation to the larger goals we set in the Consolidated plan, which is published every 5 years. Program year 2020 was the second of our Consolidated plan. Our CAPER is a culmination of a 16-month process that begins with applications for funding. As mentioned, the applications we ultimately choose must align with community goals, Consolidated plan goals, and housing policy goals. Once the program year begins on July 1st, the progress we make toward these goals are reported through this CAPER. In program year 20, we were awarded nearly $577,000 in CDBG funding, 394 in home, and 705,000 in CDBG CARES Act funding. With those funds, including any program income we received from past projects, we were able to fund a total of 12 projects. And while we receive approximately the same amount of funds each year from HUD, with the addition of CARES funds last year, the funds aren't adjusted for inflation, which means we have to do more with less money. In 2020, we funded 2 home projects. The Trinity Apartments, partially funded in program year 20, is a collaboration among nonprofit developers, a private developer, and supportive service providers. Our ultimate goal is the construction of 202 homes people can afford on 2 separate sites. Trinity broke ground in the spring of 2021 and is expected to be completed in 2023. In addition, Community Housing Development Organization operating expense funding was provided to Homeward to support their development of the Trinity Apartments and other HUD-funded projects. It is also important to note that the Bellagio home development project, which was is planned to create 200 new units, also broke ground in 2020, program year 20, and this project was funded in program year 18. In 2020, we funded a total of 10 CDBG projects, 2 projects for public services, and 4 CDBG CARES Act projects. The CDBG funds supported YWCA's Meadowlark facility, which opened its doors in May. The Meadowlark provides a comprehensive array of services to homeless families and families at risk of homelessness in one location, and ensures the families are sheltered the same night they lose their housing. The goal was to house 25 families. And as of this report, 34 families have been housed at the Meadowlark. And then roofs of the 25 ADA unit homes at the Clark Fork Commons have been replaced. This project has addressed the city's goal of preserving and maintaining existing affordable housing in Missoula. In addition, this isn't on the slide, but the Human Resource Council's owner-occupied rehabilitation program, which was funded in program year 19, is processing small rehab loans for people with low incomes, and 2 households have completed renovations and 6 are in the process of rehabilitating their homes.
All right, thanks, Karen. Up to 15% of CDBG funds can be allocated for public service projects. In program year 20, we funded 4 projects. The Housing Retention Project allowed the Poverello Center to hire a housing retention specialist to work with high barrier individuals and support them in retaining housing. Our goal for this project was to support 50 individuals. We were only able to support 20, in part due to the transfer of the position from the Poverello Center to Open Aid Alliance in April of 2021. The Rapid Intake Project provided immediate access for those experiencing homelessness to referrals and appropriate services with a focus on employment and housing. Our goal was to support 1,300 individuals, and we did. YWCA Ada's Place provided emergency housing support and case management to people experiencing homelessness. Our goal was to help 250 individuals, and we, we fell short of this goal, but that was thanks in part to the Meadowlark opening, which then housed those who would otherwise use this service. Homeward served Missoulians through their financial, renter, and homeownership classes and counseling. These classes help prepare individuals for homeownership, be savvy renters, and plan for financial success. And then thanks to the CARES Act funding of 2020, we were able to support 4 additional projects to support our shelter system and unsheltered homeless populations during the COVID-19 pandemic. The The Missoula City County Health Department's Community Outreach Coordinator was funded to provide service to unsheltered homeless individuals placed in COVID-19 quarantine and isolation locations. The MCCHD fell short of their goal to serve 312 people, but this project, we're in the process of trying to continue it into the winter of 2021. So they'll no doubt reach their goal in the coming months. And then the increase in the number of individuals experiencing unsheltered homelessness not only proves the serious impact of COVID-19 on the Missoula community, it also shows how important the COVID-19 Homeless Outreach Project, or CHOP, is in supporting those who are unsheltered. The intent of the CHOP position was to provide outreach services to those who have left the emergency shelter to socially distance themselves. And this project too far exceeded its goal. And then the intent of the emergency shelter sanitation project was to ensure that the Poverello Center is as safe and sanitary as possible for its guests, volunteers, and staff. The goals of the project were to, 1, keep the coronavirus from transmitting among individuals experiencing homelessness, 2, provide a sanitary environment for the Poverello Center, and 3, to retain the Poverello's essential employees by taking every measure possible to ensure a sanitary work environment. The Emergency Winter Shelter Project provided safe, expanded shelter capacity to Missoula's unhoused population during the harsh winter months. From its opening on November 1st, 2020, the Emergency Winter Shelter was fully staffed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Beginning in April, the shelter went down to operating 12 hours a day, providing a place to sleep for those who would otherwise experience unsheltered homelessness. This project also exceeded its goal. These projects will have a lasting impact on our community, and you can see an overview of our outcomes here from program year 2020. And then today we are asking for you to set a public hearing for September 20th to review the City of Missoula Consolidated Annual Performance and Evaluation Report, the CAPER, for HUD-funded programs for program year 2020. And then if you're interested in commenting on our CAPER, you can go to Engage Missoula, or you can email Karen or I on the at the addresses listed on your screen. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Kendra and Karen. And those are, it's kind of a good news, bad news thing. It's amazingly high numbers, which is bad news, but good news that all of this help is being provided. But it's where we are at in our world today. Okay, did we have any questions, first of all? Ms. Harp.
First off, I want to say, Karen and Kendra, thank you for a very insightful presentation. I think one of the benefits of this particular kind of report is it really kind of helps us really evaluate if we're getting our money's worth for the projects that are put forth through these home CDBG funds. And I think I want to just summarize my math that I added up. So of all the goals that these particular projects were shooting for, there was a total of 4,619 people that we will hope to affect. There was, I think, 2 cases, if I got that right, of where we fell short of our particular goals. However, when you count up all of our success stories across home and CDBG funding projects, we came out with 6,893 people, which is 2,274 more than we had hoped to help, which is a 49% increase. So I think we have done, holy smokes, we've gotten a tremendous value out of these particular funds. And I just want to compliment you. And I know all the participating agencies that have worked on this, they have been relentless in trying to work on our housing crisis that we have. And this demonstrates to a T those efforts year in and year out. So hats off to you folks. Thank you. And Gwen, I'm very happy to put this motion forward to put this to the public meeting.
Thank you, and thanks for those comments. And Brian.
I was also going to make the motion for the public hearing, but that's been done. And my thanks to Kendra and Karen. It's been a real honor on council participating in the scoring and review of the applications over the last several years. So it's great to see this. Great to see this report. Thanks.
Great, thank you. That motion is on the floor, and I'll call for public comment on the motion. I'm not seeing any hands raised. Were there any other comments or questions from council? It's a, succinct presentation, but Heather's right, huge amount of work that has gone into making these dollars stretch as far as possible. And actually, a quick question, Karen and Kendra. I'm not sure if I'm conflating programs, but these are federal dollars that come in. Do they track with inflation, or is this a standard amount? How is that? Do you understand what I'm asking? How it's sometimes with a lot of these federal programs, it's static and we lose dollars over the years because there's no inflationary adjustment set in there. But any thoughts on that?
That's correct. There's very little adjustment from year to year. So we're working with limited funds that aren't growing significantly.
Right, got it. Thank you. Okay, seeing no other questions or comments, we'll take a roll call vote, and this is setting for Monday night to then set the public hearing.
Stacy Anderson,
Yes.
Heather Harp,
Yes.
Jordan Hess, Jordan,
I'm sorry, I was double muted. Yes.
oh, no worries, thank you. Gwen Jones,
Yes.
Jesse Ramos,
Yes.
Amber Sherrill,
Yes.
Brian Von Losberg,
Yes.
and Heidi West.
Yes.
So that's unanimous for all in attendance.
Great, that can go onto the consent agenda. And Kendra and Karen, thank you so much. We appreciate all your work on this.
Thank you.
Okay, the last item on our agenda today is a resolution setting policy for the Missoula Redevelopment Agency. We have Dale Bickle here to present on that. I am one of the referring sponsors on it, as is Brian Von Losberg and Jordan Hess. So I think I'm going to just make some comments for background at the beginning. And I think Brian and Jordan, if you guys wanted to also give any opening comments, and then Dale is going to give a presentation, and we'll have questions, et cetera, on it. So this is, as I stated, a resolution setting policy for the Missoula Redevelopment Agency. And I wanted to provide some background and context on this. Frankly, this is something that several of us counselors have been working on for years now, which is kind of the way it rolls out sometimes on city council. And to give you an idea of how long, John DeBari spent a lot of time on this. We talked to a lot of people in town, did a lot of research, and there have been a lot of discussions in the community for the last few years on the Missoula Redevelopment Agency and tax increment financing. So we thought it was prudent to take a look at this. And frankly, the fact that it has taken years is very valuable in that during that time period, we could see projects come to fruition. We could also see changes in our local economy on a gradual scale as well as on a heightened scale with the pandemic. And it helps to create a context there because we really wanted to approach this carefully and get it right. From the research that we have done, it has been fascinating to really learn more about tax increment financing as a tool. It is used in, I believe, 49 states. I think Arizona is the only state that does not have this as a tool for local jurisdictions. And if you really dive into a lot of different case examples and do some reading, it's used differently in many different jurisdictions because different cities and towns and rural areas have different needs. So what really comes through is the fact that this is a very widely used tool, and it's very flexible, and different jurisdictions use it differently based on their needs. And when it isn't working very well, it's been fascinating to see how it has been changed. So there's been discussion before about the fact, about the assertion that California does not have tax increment financing anymore, but that's incorrect. California was facing numerous different challenges between Proposition 13, which limited their tax base, especially to local schools, being such a national economy, having a lot of natural disasters, and having a lot of military money coming into the state, just a very different economy than most other states. And then the 2008 recession hit, they broke down their tax increment financing and reformed it and changed it into something called enhanced infrastructure financing districts. So it's a very flexible tool that can be used in different ways that work for different places. And I think that's something to keep in mind as we were looking at this resolution, the counselors who worked on it. What we wanted to do was to create certainty. I think our main focus was to create certainty for taxing jurisdictions and taxpayers while balancing that certainty with preserving revenue for the development that Missoula needs, but frankly, that we have extremely limited tools for. And high in that category, I would put affordable housing. So it's really a balancing of those different values that we wanted to bring into a little sharper focus with this resolution. I have a schedule, and I know Dale will go over this, but I'm just going to say it so that people can hear it twice. We're hearing it in committee today. I'll look for a motion later today to basically set it for Monday night, which will set public hearings for September 20th to open and September 27th to close. And in the meantime, we're going to keep it in the ANF committee so that we can discuss this again a week from today, because I just thought it merited more time and attention. And then finally, I just also wanted to say that I think we in Missoula are very lucky to be in the situation where we have this tool, we have this resource, and frankly, because it has been very successful, we're having this discussion today. And I especially wanted to mention or discuss the fact that, frankly, we've had a very successful Missoula Redevelopment Agency with its tax increment financing investments because we've had very high caliber people running it who understand development, who have good relations with developers in town, both nonprofit and for-profit, who understand how to have the most impact. Because as I was reading about different case scenarios across America, I don't think there are places that have not been as successful as Missoula. And I think it comes down to the people that we've had in the office here, and Ellen Buchanan, Chris Behan, the staff have frankly done an amazing job. And we've got a very strong board. And especially I wanted to mention Carl Englund and Nancy Moe, decades of experience that they bring to this, which results in very, very good decisions being made that have good impact in our community. So I just wanted to say the reason why we're having this discussion today and this resolution is because we've had a very successful program and we're lucky to be having this discussion. There are so many cities and towns out there that do not have the scenario that we have here in Missoula because of lack of planning, lack of foresight, lack of using this tool. So we are very lucky to be in this position where we're going to, where we have this at our disposal. So it's a question of having input from the community, articulating a few more things, and as I discussed, that balance that we want to strike. And I would also say we're talking a lot about affordable housing these days, and that's part of this resolution, but I would say Our MRA has been investing in affordable housing for decades. This is not new. It's just a more heightened era that we're living in. So we're discussing it all the more. So having said that, Brian and Jordan, did you guys want to add any comments? Brian.
Yeah, I'll be really brief. I think you covered a lot, Gwen. And first off, I want to thank you for your efforts in getting us to this point. As you mentioned, this is the product of a lot of work over literally years. I think at this point, before the presentation, I just want to sort of preview. There's really three main points to the resolution that Dale is going to go through. But I think it's worth highlighting now. One is the idea of a cap for the districts as a percentage of the tax base. It's worthy of a lot of discussion. There is some membership relative to ex officio members on the board, which to me goes to just the general point of communication and collaboration, frankly. And then, as you mentioned, there's the highlighting of policy areas, community needs areas, which are captured in the plans in these districts. But given the importance of these topics to the community in years past, now, and certainly into the future, worth highlighting there as well. And I'll obviously have more to say later, but really interested in people's feedback. So thanks.
Great. Jordan?
Yeah, I mean, Gwen, you really covered all the high points. The fact is that tax increment financing is the single best tool we have for financing municipal priorities and for investing in our future as a community. I want to highlight one thing that you just said, Gwen, which is that this resolution is born out of the successful deployment of TIF here in Missoula. We've done some really innovative, remarkable things with tax increment financing. And I believe that this resolution will reaffirm the city's commitment to innovating, and it will reaffirm the city's commitment to investing in our community. One of the things that I'm most excited about this resolution actually codifies a lot of current practice and a lot of best practices. One of the things that I'm most excited about is that this formalizes the notion of life cycle planning, and this is something that MRA has done. But just as a 30-year-old would make different choices in a retirement plan than a 60-year-old nearing retirement might make, URDs need to make different choices over the life of the URD. There's different investment strategies that make sense based on community need and based on the function of tax increment financing. URDs really need to build increment in the early days. And that is a necessary step in order to really invest in the community priorities like housing and childcare and transportation infrastructure. So I think the resolution, as will be presented, really codifies or formalizes that life cycle planning. I think that this, as I said, reaffirms our commitment to investing in our community and making sure that investment meets our community's goals. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Okay, so Dale, I know you have a presentation for us and you can say it, rephrase it better than I, but today you're looking back and next week you're going to present a little bit more and look forward. So
right. Thank you. And thank you for the introduction related to the things that this resolution might do. And that's what I'm going to specifically talk about today is what what this resolution is proposed to do. And then Ellen is also here to help answer questions and talk about if we need a primer in how tax increment financing works overall. And I also wanted to echo that I think this is an opportunity to strengthen the way we approach TIF funding TIF projects and how we allocate those resources. So I think it's a good opportunity for that to be strengthened over the good work that we've done in partnership with MRA over the decades. So let me share my screen here. All right, now I think I did that right. You can see that.
Yep, looks great.
And now I just got to figure out how to advance the slides. All right, so as Councilman von Lossberg alluded to, there are three policy areas that we're discussing related to this resolution. First one is a limitation on the amount of tax increment financing we would have available within the city and all its URDs in total. I'll go through more specifics on how that mechanically would work in here. The second area is ensure comments from local taxing jurisdictions are considered as part of MRA project deliberations. And then area 3 is ensure that city and MRA goals are consistent, particularly in the areas of housing and infrastructure development. And I think this is an area where we have done a lot of work, and it's just a good opportunity to formalize that relationship, and also what Jordan talked about, that on how we approach projects during any particular life cycle of a URD. So I'm going to take these in reverse order and just talk about each of those policy areas and how the resolution addresses those. So first is to create a city and MRA joint strategic plan. The city has instituted citywide strategic plans, and we're working to aligning those across our departments, MRA included. And this would be, and what we want to make sure is that we are having our citywide strategic plan and departmental plans that align with our vision and how we are and how we want to set our goals to that. And once we have a vision established and we know where we want to get, these plans would help us know how to get there specifically within the URDs, working on these city plans, acknowledging the life cycle of an urban renewal district. I have next slide, we'll talk about that a little bit more. And then make sure we just understand and articulate the priorities, and if we can articulate those well, it helps the community understanding of the benefits of MRA and the projects that it is working on. And it also helps the development community. The big part of the incentives here is that MRA really helps drive private investment in our community. And with our goals clearly articulated, it's better, it's easier for the private sector to create projects that help support our goals. This is a slide that's from MRA's website that talks about how the life of an urban renewal district works. And typically on how this works, there is a time frame where it's identified that there's an area in the city that needs redevelopment. I mean, it could be that it's a stagnant or declining tax base. A tax increment district is adopted, and the powerful incentives within that district create private investment. And as the TIF ages and private investment starts, you can see the incremental portion. So that portion of that where the TIF was frozen, that's available for infrastructure development inside that district. And so early on in the life of a district, we're starting to create increment because there is private sector investment. Typically, those in the MRA makes investments in partnership with the private sector to build infrastructure, supporting those investments. But that builds that tax increment tax base, and these investments start to happen. And over time, as those developments come online, it improves the tax base. And then as a tax increment district matures, there is additional tax base available where we are able to specifically address more public infrastructure issues and use those dollars to fund that, those type of things. And and so that's an important aspect to be able to plan when we prioritize projects within the URDs to understand where that life cycle is. Another issue area in the resolution is MRA board representation. And the resolution proposes to add non-voting ex officio representatives to the board in 3 areas. First, the chair of the A&F committee of City Council, a designee from Missoula County Public Schools, and a designee from the Missoula County Commissioner's Office. So what this will help is facilitate that communication with taxing jurisdictions. It provides a broader perspective of community needs when we have those folks at the table, and will generally enhance the community benefit of tax immigrant financing. When you make those types of decisions with those specific expertise of those things, our decisions will be better and provide a better community benefit. And then finally, there is the cap, the limitation of incremental taxable value. And thinking about the ways to do this, the approach we took was to use the cumulative total incremental taxable value. So that is the taxable value of all of the urban renewal districts in the city as a percentage of the total taxable value of the city. Right now, the resolution proposes a 9% limitation on total taxable value of increment districts. In the next presentation, you'll see Ellen and I will talk about how that cap specifically works on the ground, and kind of looking forward to the known projects that we are working on, such as the Scott Street housing project, and how that might impact, how a cap might impact those type of things, so we can make a really informed decision about this. I think one thing that's important to note, we worked with our bond counsel on proposing the language related to the cap, and it's that the cap is subordinate to our debt covenant. So lots of MRA projects are bonded, and there's a contractual agreement to maintain certain financial covenants, and this cap is subordinate to those. So we can't violate our covenants with this cap. And then, to the extent we do a measurement that shows that there is a incremental taxable value greater than the proposed cap, that amount has to be remitted back to the taxing jurisdictions in their proportionate share to the mill levies. So in the next couple of slides, I'm going to show some of the history on where we're at related to the numbers here on incremental values. So this is the history of that number, and this is the measurement that we were using for the cap. So it's the cumulative effect of our districts and how we would apply, how we are looking at that. So in the past history, and if you look back even before this for decades, MRA bounced around at an approximate average of about 4% of the tax base. And you can see, we've seen over the past few years, and we've presented this each year during our budget process, that the percentage of taxable value has really started to increase. And that really happened in 2018. There was a legislative change in 2018 that is a driver of that. Now, I mean, some of this is that we created new districts early in this decade, and then that incremental value is starting to increase. And that's intentional, I think. As a reminder, we create these urban renewal districts in these areas that need redevelopment. So we are incenting more development in these areas, and we would expect that the taxable value is increasing faster than the areas outside of a tax increment district. But what we are striving to do is reach that balance. But in 2018 is when the 2-year appraisal cycle kicked in, and so rather than the 6-year appraisal, we see it happening. So 2018, 2020, and 2022. The other portion of that really affected the percentage of incremental taxable value is that not only is the reappraisal 2 years, but the phase-in of value went away. So what happened prior to that is on the 6-year reappraisal cycle, there was a new project constructed in town that newly taxable property value would be phased in over time. Now that goes in all at once. And so that created, because in the past that would have been smoothed out over time, but now that is creating these spikes up. And so that means, to the extent that we have that new construction happening in the tax increment districts, all of that value is coming on in the first year, and it's going to create these bigger jumps as well. And so I think the limitation that's proposed in resolution will help balance that out and help keep at a level that will keep adequate operational revenues, not only within the city, but helping other taxing jurisdictions. But we also want to make sure to hit that balance, because we also need, as was said earlier, tax increment financing is absolutely our best economic development tool and best infrastructure development tool we have at our disposal. So striking that balance is really important. This is a slide that shows the history of all of the individual URDs in various colors. And just to point out, URD1 is the Hellgate district here. That's what it was labeled, but just to avoid any confusion, that's Hellgate. And you can see some of the ways that you can see a little bit of the life cycle in here. You look at URD3 and URD2 are our two most mature districts. And you can see that they also have the largest percentage of taxable value. As we see new development in some of these other ones, like North Reserve, Scott Street, it's still, I mean, while there's been some great development projects that have been constructed and are being constructed, you can see that it's just that it's still, I would argue that it's still at the beginning of its life cycle. And then places like Riverfront Triangle, Front Street, they're all with the new developments that are coming on and still are going to add a bunch of projects, of known projects. I think you'll see those start growing as well as those districts start to mature. And then just as a bit of context, this is the snapshot of this year, basically where the taxable value relies. So you can see URD3 as a large mature district has quite a bit of incremental value in it versus the other districts there. So I'm going to go into a little bit of the mechanics of the remittance itself. And now in the past couple of years, we've done, MRA has done a remittance to taxing jurisdictions during the budget process. And this is the same, this methodology is the same on how that is calculated at the bottom of this. So presuming a 9% remittance, MRA determines the source, and what MRA does is it isn't a pro rata share of each individual district. MRA would have the latitude to look at within each district, understand the capacities of each district, understand the debt service requirements, priority projects, and all of the factors to know which district should be where a remittance would come from should there be a time where the incremental value exceeds the cap. By law, remittances has to be proportional to each taxing jurisdiction's mill levies. So so based on that year's mill levies, that remittance is proportional to that. And as an example, the city represents typically about 29% of the mill levies that are subject to the increment districts. And then the final bullets here are the cost of it. And just putting it in 1% chunks, so understand what it is, and it's not insignificant. A total remittance of that, if incremental value went over the 9% cap, say by 1%, that the remittance that this or this resolution would trigger would be $1.6 million approximately. The city would receive a pro rata share of about $429,000 of that. Next steps, Gwen talked a little bit about the calendar. And and this is with the calendar that has been proposed. So we're in A and F today, looking for a referral out of here to set a public hearing. That would be on September 20th. And that would be set at Monday's city council meeting on the 13th. We want to do another A&F committee presentation on the estimated impacts of, I put ordinance, excuse me, that's a resolution, not an ordinance, but I think we need to understand from both sides that Ellen and I are working on an analysis of known projects and expected taxable values. And then what, if those come on, if that triggers hitting a cap, where, we're just kind of a case study on where, and then we're going to have to do a remittance out of certain other URDs and what does that entail looks like. And also then try to show from a general fund perspective on where that funding is needed. And what essentially the challenges we are facing related to our ongoing revenues in the general fund. September 20th would be the opening of the public hearing there, and then as customary now, public hearing would continue to the 27th, where it would close and final consideration could be done that day. So I will stop there. And if you have any questions for Ellen or I.
Okay, thank you. Brian.
Thanks. Thanks, Dale. And I've seen the presentation material in some form and this data over time, but when I see it again, certain things come to mind. So actually a request, Dale, over the next few weeks, I think it would be helpful on the timeline you spoke to the appraisal change from the 6-year to the 2, and I think we should actually label that on that graph. And then I think it would also be helpful if we could maybe denote on that graph the remittances we took, the years that we took the remittances. There's the 2 that I'm thinking of recently, and the amounts that we did, just from it just captures the history, and I think it's helpful.
You're
Yes, they do that.
Great, thank you. Okay, questions? Jesse.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I've got a couple of questions and comments on it. So the first one is easy. On the last whereas on the first page of the resolution, it says whereas, comma, as, comma. So I was hoping we could just strike that out. Just a little typo there. But then, so in the fourth whereas, on the resolution, it says the MRA uses tax increment financing whereby property tax dollars which accrue from new development within buildings are directed back into the district. Can we change that and add in that new revenue, or that revenues to MRA also accrue from rising valuations, property valuations, as well as mill levy increases?
I tell you what, why don't you do this, Jesse? Why don't you put it in writing and send it to me and the other sponsors? And we got quite in a schedule here where we're going to have plenty of time to look at it, but that would be helpful to just think it through. Okay. But I appreciate you reading this with an eagle eye, because I've seen it too much, so I can't see it at all anymore. But why don't you take that second suggestion, put it in an email to us, and we'll take a look at that. Okay.
Okay, that sounds good. And I have another couple quick questions.
Sure, go ahead.
So in section A, under the now therefore be it resolved in the solution section, in section A, it says the city intends to remit tax increment revenues in dollar amount of such excess over the 9%. Why can't we say the city shall? Because I know that we've already addressed kind of the main point, whereas we have to have enough in there to service the debt, and this is going to be subordinate to that. So why can't we say the city shall remit tax revenues in excess of the 9% instead of intends to?
Again, put that in an email to me and I'll chew on it. I think it's a pretty strong statement. But I'll take a look at that. And then you had one more, Jesse? Sounded like you had.
My last question. So just in section B, I was just hoping for a quick explanation. I think I understand it. The city's intention to remit tax increment revenues as described in this resolution is subordinate in all respects to the city's covenants and obligations with respect to its tax increment revenue bonds and shall not be taken into account for this purposes of additional debt tests. Is that just saying that essentially this is subordinate to that? So we obviously have to pay for debt services before this cap comes into effect. Is that what we're saying, or this resolution?
Dale, is that, I know that you corresponded with bond counsel, and I assume that's where it came from, but can you speak to that?
Yes, that's exactly right. We have these contractual obligations related to our debt covenants. So, and so this just makes it clear that we have to maintain those covenants, and this can't get in the way of that.
And Gwen, I have one more quick question, if you'll allow it.
Go ahead.
So it just says that the resolution says that the strategic plan focuses on affordable housing, infrastructure development, and childcare, and that we're essentially doing this as part of the strategic plan. I could be missing it, but I don't think the city strategic plan mentions childcare at all currently.
No, I don't think it mentions childcare specifically, but we're elevating that as a priority based on the last several economic impact years. So, but what we're saying is MRA needs to complete their strategic plan, which is close to being completed, and taking it into account the context of the city's strategic plan and melding these goals. And Dale or Brian or Jordan, you can add to that, but in general, that's what we're saying.
Well, I can't remember off the top of my head where in our plans, whether it was in the mayor's priorities or in our strategic plan, but I know there is an emphasis there. I think one of the things we do have to be careful about related to MRA is that the legal restrictions towards funding does not necessarily provide a direct avenue to support childcare with MRA dollars. So we just have to be careful about how we approach that, whether it's in partnerships or some venue. But that's just because in general the restrictions on increment are for public infrastructure, and so we have to understand how childcare would fit into that category.
Yeah, and
I have more, but I'll
the clarification on that issue before we move on. So Partnership Health Clinic that went in at the food bank is the concept in mind. So we all know that MRA and tax increment financing can't go to pay labor at any of these places, but it can put in infrastructure, and that's the model in mind in terms of childcare.
You bet. And partnership is a public agency, and they could qualify through that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we have other people queued up here. And before we go on, Brian and Jordan as co-sponsors, did you have any other thoughts on these topics that were raised?
I didn't. I think you covered. I was just going to ask Dale, and I appreciate Jesse's comments and suggestions. And I think, suggested language would be great. But I was going to ask Dale. I didn't hear anything in those that sounded contrary to the intent of the ordinance, but I was going to ask Dale if he had any feedback.
No, I agree. I didn't hear anything of where Jesse's changes were contrary to law or the intent of the resolution.
Again, if you just want to email that to us, it helps. I have a headache, so I can only process so much, but I agree. Okay, great. Thank you for those good questions. Ms. Cheryl.
Yeah, thanks. And I want to first thank my colleagues for bringing this forward. I know this has been a lot of work over a number of years, and I think it's good timing for this to be coming forward. So I really appreciate it. Dale, and I apologize if I missed this. I'm always, whenever we're doing TIF presentations, I'm always just kind of fixating on different pieces of it. And so it's a complicated thing. But when we're talking about capping, putting the cap in place, and I'm just curious if you can speak to like how that affects our ability to bond, if it does in those districts. And I think you kind of answered part of that with the debt covenants response to Jesse, but could you speak to how what kind of future effect or that could have, or, not that we're at this juncture in our history worried about property values tanking. It's always possible. And so kind of how if we had an absolute turnaround, everyone decided they still love California and hate Montana, something like that, like what happens?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that is essentially what we're going to try to answer with some specific examples and numbers at the community meeting next week. The analysis is, it's not easy, and there's a lot of estimates we have to do. But there would come a point where issuing additional debt could be where we'd have, council always approves all of MRI's debt financing, and that may come with an acknowledgement that that either that it's subordinate to this cap and that's okay, or some sort of other change, and we just have to understand what that looks like. But it is. I think there could be an effect there. Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Great. Heather?
Thanks. This is a really thoughtful resolution. I think it really kind of underscores the progression that this council and the administration has really start to really understand that the value not only in TIF financing, how it's always been, but we are now at a tipping point that we either have to pivot away from what we've always done, or we will lose support for TIF financing. I think we're realizing that we have to do things differently, and that the three priorities are going to be on housing, it's going to be on infrastructure and childcare, and this resolution really encapsulates that. So I want to thank you all for your efforts, letting us know this weekend that this was coming up. I really do appreciate that. I guess my big question is, when it's something as big as TIF financing, which has been contentious in this community for a number of years, I want to ask this question with the utmost respect. Of those people that have been opposing it, how many people were invited to the table to discuss this? How were they involved so that they felt that they could actually be part of building consensus around this new policy?
So I can speak to that. Over the entire 6 years I've been on council, I've had numerous discussions with all sorts of different people with all sorts of different thoughts and opinions on tax increment financing and MRA, and have taken all of those experiences and condensed them down to this. That's how I would answer it. But I don't know if the other sponsoring counselors want to discuss their experiences.
Thanks, Gwen.
Sure, I'll weigh in. I don't think it's a particularly different answer. I mean, so to be clear, it wasn't a formal process over some set period of time, I mean, this is something I've been looking at since my first day on council, frankly, and watching the evolution of the discussion. I've, throughout that time, always tried to put my place, and I've done this with any policy before this body, frankly, to understand critics and criticism of what we're doing, as well as advocates. And I think so it's hard to point to anything. It's been long conversation with a lot of people with a lot of viewpoints over the better part of probably 7 years, frankly, with a much bigger emphasis in the last, I'd say 3. I think a particular thing worth noting is MRA commissioned some study review where they spoke with all the council members and all sorts of folks. I think they spoke to all of us as well as folks all throughout the community, critics and advocates alike and everybody in between. And I've certainly read through every word of that input around this. And maybe the last thing to say is, the legislature has debated, frankly, debates TIF policy every year, every other year when they're in session, and pretty robustly in between. I paid attention to those and the specific proposals. I've often found those proposals, well, I'll let it be at that, but it's certainly covered I'll have more to say about that, but it's covered the whole range from extreme critics that would abolish the system to advocates, that wouldn't change a thing, and everything in between.
Thanks, Brian.
Great. Oops, my lights are going out. Thanks for bringing up the report that was submitted to MRA by Ms. McKnight this summer. And I also read all of that. And there was a ton of information in there culled from the entire community that was very in-depth. So I appreciated that. Jordan, I've got a question from you, and I don't know if you had a comment on that topic also, but.
Well, I was going to comment on something else. I was going to provide some comment on the concept of the city's intent versus MRA shall. And I think the city does a lot of things that it intends to do, and it follows through on those things. And intent is extraordinarily important, whether it's our intent to implement the growth policy, whether it's our intent to implement the housing policy. Those are all value statements, and they're all statements of intent. And we are more likely to do something. I'd say we're extraordinarily likely to do something if we have an expression of intent. So intent recognizes a strong will of an elected body to do a thing that is proposed. And that's good enough for me. It's also flexible. So if the wheels fall off the bus, as Amber was talking about it a moment ago, it gives us flexibility to change course. If a once in a generation project comes along, it gives us flexibility to change course. The overarching likelihood is that we would follow the resolution, because that's our adopted policy once the resolution is passed. So I think intent is strong, and intent is good, and it recognizes that the city council is the elected body, and that's where the final decision would always lie. So I think it's adequate, and I appreciate the concern around that. While I have the floor, I'd be happy to make the motion to set the public hearing, if that's in order.
Thank you. That's in order. Appreciate that.
Thanks.
Great. And I appreciate your comments. I think the intent versus shall, it bears more thought. So send us an email, Jesse. And I did want to make another comment too. The three components that comprise this resolution, each are very different. So it's not just a one and done. There's three components, and each bear its thought and attention. The one thing we have not discussed very much is adding the ex officio non-voting members to the board. And I just wanted to address that a little bit in terms of explanation. And that is that I think currently, anyone, of course, can comment on MRA meetings and on items, action items, et cetera. So the door is open, but I think a bit of a stronger connection between MCPS and the county would provide for a little more interaction. I'm not sure what level of interaction, that would remain to be seen, but I think having more interaction, more communication, looking at MRA projects through a little bit of a different lens than the city, but looking at it through the point of view of the school district. And this is where there's a lot of kids that live, and we could use sidewalks in this area. So this is a good project to put forth and give support to for the MRA board. These are the types of things that I would like to see happen a little bit more. And having the county has growth plans, they have transportation plans, having more synergy and interaction there, I think also, frankly, is beneficial to the community all around. And that's what all of this really gets to, is how we're going to benefit the community. So that's the thought process behind having a bit of a stronger connection between those entities by having them have a seat at the table. And I don't know if they'll come to all of the meetings or any, but they'll probably be tracking the agenda a little bit more closely and weigh in when it's relevant. Okay, so Ms. Harp, you had another question?
Yeah, on this section number 2. So can you maybe tell us a little bit more about what your decision-making process was of identifying those additional roles, and perhaps what representation was left on the cutting room floor, if you will?
Well, it's really focusing on what the large taxing entities are, the large taxing jurisdictions, and that's what they are. I think that will have the most impact. As I said, the door is always open to anyone for public comment, but I think strengthening that relationship was important. And I don't know, Jordan or Brian, if you wanted to weigh in on that at all, or otherwise, Jordan, you're next.
I think
always cues up.
I think you covered it. I think you covered it, Gwen. I think these are the double-digit representatives, I guess, as far as other taxing jurisdictions. So, Mountain Line comes to mind as another fairly large taxing jurisdiction, but not nearly as large as MCPS or as the county. Hellgate, the Hellgate School District is partially within the city of Missoula, as is now the DeSmet School District. The Hellgate School District has a sliver of overlap with URDs in the North Reserve Scott Street area. DeSmet does not. So I think there's some as Gwen said, I think everyone would always be welcome, and there would be the intent would be that there would be some outreach around projects in those areas that would impact those other taxing jurisdictions. But it was just a case of, is the conservation district big enough to be on this? There's a lot of smaller taxing jurisdictions, and this felt like a manageable size, and the door's always open, like Gwen said.
Great. Did you have anything else, Jordan, or no? You were just raising your hand for that, it looks like. Okay, we have a motion on the floor for this coming Monday night to set the public hearing. I will call for public comment. I'm not seeing any raised hands in public comment. So were there any other questions or comments from council? And like I said, we will hear this next week and have plenty of time to discuss it then. I know that it got it out late Friday and people are still digesting it, so it seemed prudent to hold it over. Brian.
Yeah, I just, is our meeting set to go to 2:30? Am I up against the?
Yes.
Okay, so I just wanted to thank Dale for his work and on this, and Ellen, as well as the mayor and folks in the administration, MRA board members. I think about discussions, you and I believe Jordan and I have had, with folks from MCPS and countless others, but really wanted to thank Dale and Ellen. And I want to be, really clear. I'm a unabashed supporter of the districts and TIF. And I think they've been incredibly successful, and I look forward to them being completely very, very successful moving forward. I'm looking forward to the discussion next week. I believe that the board chair, Carl England's going to join us. We had a brief discussion over the weekend, and I knew he couldn't be here today, but look forward to his input, next week, and the data that Dale talked about presenting. One of the things I remember was there was I think it was a city club debate around tax increment financing maybe a little bit more than a year ago. And I was looking back over that article, and David Erickson from the Missoulian has done excellent reporting about TIF and projects over many years. I'm grateful for that. And one of the thing he highlighted in the first sentence of that article was that the mayor relayed that the increment value as a percentage of the tax base had risen to 14% from historic levels of 4%. And it turned out that was wrong. It was a calculation error. But David Erickson, he was on top of it and reported that. That was a salient figure to report. And sure enough, David led with that in the beginning of the article. So this idea around a cap and what it exactly should be, if there should be one, it's a challenging topic, but I think a hallmark of good governance is having these sorts of discussions around challenging topics like this. So first off, just want to very belatedly, because I don't think we ever did correct the record on that point, that it wasn't 14%. It's what you saw in the graph from Dale. It's, in the upper 8s at this point, and that we pay attention to these sorts of things and these changes and the historical trends and where we're headed in the future. And I think all of that is responsible good governance that's paying attention to our constituents and the finances of the city. So looking forward to the discussion.
Great, thanks. Heather?
Thanks, Gwen. Brian, that jogged my memory. I had another question regarding that cap. And Dale, maybe you have a little bit more knowledge about this. When you were doing your analysis, reaching out to other communities that use TIF, did they have a range that of that limitation or that cap, so that we understand where 9% was the ultimate chosen goal?
So, I'm not aware of another community in Montana having a cap, and it really is all over the map on what other taxing jurisdictions have for incremental value as a percentage of total taxable value. And I think that's important to know, because it's really, every community needs the ability to set those where they need to be. Rural communities in particular tend to you have a much higher percentage of incremental value than urban areas, just because their tax base is smaller, and they just need that in order to get their priorities done in those particular areas. They need more of that. But I think each jurisdiction is going to have to look for their own balance, and I think this is and I think just like we're doing here. So.
I guess a follow-up to that would be, where do those rural communities end up having their percentages average out to be? If ours has been 4.
Yeah, that's something that we'll put on, because I know that data is available. I don't have it available with me. We can include that next week. But there's been communities that have it, well over 50%. There's, in small rural areas. I think, some urban areas have had it as high as 15%. I think most of the bigger urban areas today are under 10%, like we are. But I don't want to speak too much out of turn from my memory on this, but I think I'll try to, Ellen and I will try to get a slide that shows that.
Yeah, I think that's really relevant context to this whole discussion, because I think there's members of our community that are worried that we're spending too much. And I think if we can be able to see how we compare and contrast with rural communities and or our neighboring larger communities, I think that helps to alleviate some of the concerns that people might have, or ask better questions at least. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. And to add to what Dale said, my read of it's different everywhere. It's different across the country and different communities, and used for completely different purposes in different communities. So here in Missoula, we're working on investment in infrastructure and economic growth and housing. In other places, it's brownfields is a much higher issue, or regrouping after, I think, Jefferson County, Montana, they've got a mining operation that left. So they are regrouping. That's been successful, is my understanding. So it really comes down to what's best locally. I don't see any other hands raised. Ellen Buchanan, I saw you had your camera on earlier. I meant to circle to you. Did you have anything you wanted to add in or say, or just want to see us next week?
No, I think Dale covered what I wanted to say, and that was the kind of cautionary word about raising expectations about how we can use TIF for childcare. Certainly, we can use the food bank model and things like that. It's a matter of does the city want to own childcare facilities if we want to use TIF dollars for bricks and mortar.
Got it. Thanks. Okay, I am seeing no other hands raised. We'll be here next week and with more questions and more public comment, I'm sure. And for now, we will take a roll call vote on the motion to set Monday night for setting the public hearing.
Stacy Anderson,
Yes.
Heather Harp,
Yes.
Jordan Hess,
Yes.
Gwen Jones,
Yes.
Jesse Ramos,
Yes.
Amber Sherrill,
Yes.
Brian Von Losper,
Yes.
Heidi West.
Yes.
So that's unanimous for all in attendance.
Thank you. That will go on the consent agenda for Monday night. I appreciate everyone's comments and thoughts and questions, and we will see you next week, and we will stand adjourned. Thank you very much.